Hello and welcome everyone to the new Center for Research and Practices Curatorial Practice 2, Curating the Future. I'm going to be your instructor for this one-credit seminar. As a background info, this seminar started with the Module 1, which was actually last year around the same time, maybe a little bit before. We ended it in November, in which we I don't think anyone from this class, actually the two Manuels were there. So beside Manuels, I don't think other people were there to remember, but maybe Manuel and Manuel remember. We kind of like that seminar was about problematizing the current state of curatorial practice and art practices. We had many in-seminar guests who spoke to us about the problems of contemporary art and the problems of curating art at this point in time. Now, this seminar, which is actually the second module, I mean, I can go into detail. There was actually a preliminary seminar, which I actually began this as a 3-module seminar. The first one, which I will probably redo next year, is called The History of Curatorial Practice, which basically begins with the early curated shows with the data and surrealist shows, and kind of like brings us to where we are now in terms of like how did this thing called curatorial practice evolve and became this profession that it is now. So that was the first module, which I did it the summer of 2014. Actually, it wasn't done for New Center. It was done for Global Center for Graduate Studies, GCAS, or whatever it's called. I think it's called GCAS. And then we basically started a New Center and the second module and the third module. Now, I want to actually make the syllabus and the reading material of those other 2 modules available to you guys because it might be helpful and handy for you to see how we got where we are. But basically, what we're going to care for now is where we are, which is what are we planning to do. And the reason why I call this seminar Curating the Future is because I've been thinking and actually working on how to reinvent this practice called curatorial practice. What are ways in which we can still call ourselves curators, but do stuff that doesn't necessarily fit into the conventional understanding of the term curator as it's described by universities, art journals, and as it's understood by a lot of artists who like work with curators in terms of getting their careers up. And I kind of consider a lot of what I do, even though it's not curatorial, part of curatorial practice, which is from the get-go, if you look at the syllabus, I sort of like began my professional curatorial practice by doing an exhibition which was reanimating and processing and reanimating part of American Museum of Natural History's archive for the purpose of understanding how there's a relationship between early museum practice, early science and nature and anthropology museum practice, and ideas that were emerging in science called cybernetics. And that sort of like was a very unconventional curatorial practice because it was right on the border of works that archivists do. And then I did a show in 2013, which you can consider it or like a conventional curatorial practice, even though I tried my best to shift it and change it, which was called Encyclopedia Iranica, Encyclonospace Iranica. And the show was in Access Gallery. You can find the catalog essay of the show in my academia page, and you have the link on the syllabus. And that show had basically, I asked several Iranian artists to respond to one particular talk and text by Iranian philosopher Reza Negarestani. After that, I did another curatorial project called Incredible Machines, which was actually a kind of like reinventing the medium of academic conferences and mixing it up with new ways of presentation. And that's where this idea that we can utilize Google Hangouts and organize seminars and stuff began. The success of that conference. And basically, Then we started the news center, and my work in the news center is a little bit curatorial, even though we're a collective of 3 people. But I really consider what I do kind of like curatorial, because it involves planning semesters, thinking about the kind of stuff that goes well together, inviting people to teach, and giving ideas form, even though these forms are virtual, and putting them, making them available to publics. Now, last January, I did an exhibition for this gallery in Vienna called Schneiderei. They had asked me to just put together a show. They just wanted to work with me. They didn't really have any agenda or any idea of what they want to do. And that project, basically, for those of you who are not aware of it, sort of like evolved from me wanting to do. I always started wanting to do a conventional curatorial show, but then it quickly became something far larger, which was basically I invited about 35 artists to participate in the exhibit or in the project. They each provided me with 1 or 2 or 3 images of their works. Now, these works, if they were photographic, basically they were their works. And then, or images of documentations of their work, or stills from their videos. And what we did was we fed these images to Google reverse image search and showed the resulting images. The exhibition became this 700-page exhibition, basically 700 images we gathered from the results of Google's search, and we put up on a wall. And I'll make all that material available to you also to take a look at, because it's very crucial for you to see, because the project we'll be working on is basically a continuation of that project. Basically, now, have you had time to read the syllabus? Because syllabus only came to you like this morning. I'm going to skip the part of the syllabus that has to do with course description and go to the project description and go over the project description with you, because we really should get that part clear. Okay, so if you want to follow it, it's in the classroom link. There's a sidebar text on the side here, which I'm gonna like put the link here. There it is. If you click, you see it. Okay, where is the syllabus? There we go. So scroll down below course description and requirement. There's something called exhibition treatment, right? So from cruise missiles to point cloud technology, computational image recognition software is rapidly being developed by for-profit companies and the military complex as part of the ongoing race towards the emergence of artificial intelligence. The aggregation of visual information by non-optical means enables unprecedented analytic speed. Maps, geographical information, and any image uploaded to the cloud effectively becomes data prone to examination. The ultimate goal is to remove human subjects from warfare and analytic endeavors, thus minimizing intuitive thinking in the face of weaponized information. This presupposes that data itself can effectively replace observation, reality-based reality, and foster alternative policy objectives in many different political and aesthetic aspects of human life. Background and location. So the project will materialize at the space called Transit Display Gallery in Prague. I was invited to do this exhibit over the internet. I never met the director of the gallery, even though I had heard about the gallery, because it's a very respected gallery and they have a track record of showing a very good media and technology work, but also they have another line of inquiry, which is investigating the history of modern, contemporary, and conceptual work in Eastern Europe, particularly Czechoslovakia. The Czechoslovakia and then the Czech Republic after the separation of the country. So people know the space. The space is a rigorous space. It's on the map of contemporary, global contemporary art spaces which are discussed, and they sort of have a loose affiliation, like few spaces around the world, with the new museum in New York. The gallery has 2 rooms, and then what we're going to do is I'm asking the artist in the show to provide us each a video or a still image, digital, from a video that they've done, or a still image. So basically, it's sort of like the beginning point of it is very similar to for machine use only, right? So we're going to gather these images from the artists, whether they're moving images in the form of a video or a single digital image in a form of, I don't know, JPEG or whatever they decide to give us, right? And then what we're going to do together, we're going to think collectively and work together over the course of the next 2 sessions in order to come up with ways to design an algorithm, of course with the help of a programmer, which will be paid by the gallery, to turn our plan of how to deal with these videos into an algorithm that will look at these videos and images non-optically, because of course the algorithm does not have eyes, like we read in the preamp, and basically look for things, grab things, understand things in these videos, and then synthesize them in a singular, all-wrapping image for the second room in the gallery. So the gallery has 2 rooms, and my starting point is that I want to show the original videos, even though last time we did not show the original images that we ran through the Google reverse image search. But this time, I think I want, because the resulting image is singular, I think it's very important that people see the multiplicity of sources that these singular images are derived from. So basically, and because we are fortunate because this is a media gallery and they have plenty of projectors, screens, monitors, computers, and devices that have digital outputs, right? So basically, we will show all these videos in one room and then show the resulting image that passes through our algorithm in the other room. So basically, the work in this class, beside what we're going to learn here of how curators actually organize exhibitions, like just the nuts and bolts of doing an exhibition, is to design this algorithm together. Think about what ways can a machine look at video footage, and we have also a couple of sound people here who could help us think of how the sound from these videos can be reanimated, and how can we sort of like look for what things and how to prioritize what we gathered from all of them. How can we prioritize certain videos over the other by putting them in a different hierarchy? How, as the syllabus describes it, how are we going to like assign judgment and assign determinacy to this indeterminate flow of images coming from the artist, and then see if it's possible to come up with a composite, an abstract composite that somehow relates to these videos. So that's sort of like the starting point. Of course, we can change parameters of it and change a lot of the stuff about it, but this is where we're going to start. Now, I also have a presentation to sort of like a lecture to do today, but I'm not going to get into that before hearing some words from you guys, and not necessarily introduce yourself and that boring routine of like tell us about yourself, but basically I really want to hear, now that you heard what the project's about, I want to hear what do you think of the project and what do you expect to get out of the project. And I'm taking notes now. So let's start from Quinn, which is to my right side here. Quinn, do you want to enlighten?
Sure, yeah. I'm a composer and I guess something of a curator in Philadelphia with primarily music, I guess. which is always inherently theatrical, and things you can do with the gallery space. There's, a vocabulary from theatrical analysis can be very, very useful, I find. So far, what it sounds like, prompting this programmer to make an algorithm. We can certainly sonify things, right? Like, you can always read an image, convert it into a matrix is the mathematical term, run that into some sine waves. It's very crude, the sonification, data mashing 101.
Remember, the videos also have sound. I kind of want to keep these two audio-visual elements separate, because there's a lot of work out there these days where they visualize sound or they make sound out of visuals, right?
Yeah.
But we already have a source of visuals, which are like videos submitted by artists, and then these videos, most of them, or at least some of them, will have a soundtrack which can itself be synthesized. Right? Now, before even getting into that discussion, because that probably will come later, tell us what do you expect from the seminar for yourself?
Yeah, of course. I just, I'm always down to hone perspectives of, I guess, what curating is, especially since, in music, it's very recent that that a few institutions are starting to say we need a curatorial turn in music.
Joshua was talking about that to me earlier too, like a couple of weeks ago, but go ahead.
Right. And, I think we should definitely pull from and collaborate from your world. Not that any real institutions really know about me or care about who I am, but as we begin to hustle them, which is how I think of institutions, I definitely want to be as, I guess, practiced as possible for sure. I mean, curating's curating is. There's a lot to think about, a lot to hone.
Well, keep that in mind, because you guys are the not only part of the project, but there's a pedagogical process in play here, which means you want to take something home from the seminar. So keep that in mind and make sure that you communicate that either one-on-one with me or collectively through the class. Olivia, what about you?
Hey, yeah, I'm really interested in this concept of kind of collaboratively discussing ways to bring determinacy to all of these indeterminate images, and kind of coming up with a creative system in doing so, or creating non-standard hierarchies. Yeah, and I don't know, I'm critical of a lot of curation also, so it's nice to kind of take an experimental approach to putting something new into practice.
So when Olivia talks about indeterminacy, this kind of goes back to some of the other art seminars we've had and my own curatorial practice part 1, which this idea of contemporary art being indeterminate is a concept developed by one of our board members and a colleague of mine, Sohail Malik, in a series of lectures called Art's Exit from Contemporary Art. And for those of you who, my microphone is muted. Can you hear me? Okay, my system's giving me wrong message. So yeah, so basically the critique is that contemporary art is too wishy-washy, and it does not have any kind of intentionality or any kind of directionality in terms of what it wants to say, what it wants to do. It's just a bunch of vague, indeterminate images or concepts thrown in and left to the audience to kind of via the phenomenological experience make sense of it and give it meaning, and all interpretations are okay, and everyone can have their own understanding of it, right? So the indeterminacy critique is about how we need art that is actually determinate, that actually to some extent is determinate, right? So we're actually going to exercise that as a collective, right? Because most people we're asking to, I'm inviting to the show, are still operating under the indeterminate art paradigm. They're making stuff that's very vague and kind of like out there, right? So we are going to use our sort of like collective power to design an algorithm that kind of like determine what these works are. Okay. So Mari, do you want to talk?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Another word before you talk.
Sure.
I've been working with Olivia for a while, and she's a certificate student of ours, and I really like her work, and she's actually invited to be in the show already, but that does not exclude other people in the class to go through the curatorial route of being included in the show, which means if you really want to participate with a video or an image in the show, you should talk to me, because I will then work with you to see if what you want to submit fits the show, or what you. I'm just saying it that way because I want to be in charge of the artists invited to the project, right? But you're totally welcome to think of your participation in the show, because I think especially if you're a visual artist. Oh, actually, Manuel Correa is also in the show, but when we're going to get to it. So a couple of people in a class are already artists in the show, whether they're in a class or not. So the rest of you might want to also think about ways you can contribute literally to the show by providing videos and images, beside being part of the curatorial team. Okay? So go ahead.
Okay. I guess I'm hoping in this course, and kind of excited to find ways of, I guess, unsettling metaphors that come with curating internet adjacent works. I think a lot of times, I don't know, I've just seen metaphors becoming the end goal for processing works and understanding them, rather than having tactical use in making new understandings, right? I don't know if that's too biting, but I'm very hopeful that throughout this course I'll find ways to kind of get away from some of the usual metaphors of organizing
Now the
things.
thing is, I can respond to you, but why don't we just move ahead and then I'll respond.
Sure.
Manuel Vargas. I know you're auditing, but still you can talk.
Yes. Well, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do, but the fact that it's an algorithm is kind of interesting, because
Great. You can just sit back.
It's like a machine.
You can sit back and just enjoy watching this unfold. That's perfect as someone who's auditing.
Yeah. But if I get involved, like, probably.
Yes, definitely.
It will be fine. So, but
now Manuel Correa, Manuel actually assisted me in for machine use only project. So actually, Manuel, can you turn your camera on? Hey, so Manuel, and of course, like backlit, like you know what you're doing, right? Because you're a filmmaker, so you've decided to stick against the light so we don't see your face, right? Is that the game? You can't turn around so.
No, look, isn't that kind of nice?
If you turn your chair around, then we can see you, right?
Yeah, but then I'll have to sit somewhere else.
Here we go.
Hello.
Hello. Manuel's a filmmaker. He's got a fresh new film that's being shown around the world right now and here and there, which is called Art Offline, which deals with the interactions between art and technology. I'm in the film, but beside being a filmmaker, Manuel helped me put together the for machine use only show. And even in this show that we're doing, Manuel and his partner Emil are going to play a kind of a role here in terms of being, like, basically you can consider Manuel my TA in the class. He's not really enrolled in the class. He's here to be part of the discussion, and then he's going to basically gather stuff and be the go-to person between us, the weeks that the class is not in session, the weeks that class are in session, and remind you of the stuff that you were supposed to do for the show and all that, so we can keep it all together, right? And if you have any questions or any kind of like stuff about the work, about the show, if you can't find me, Manuel will be around on Facebook and social media, email to help you. But go ahead, Manuel, because I also told you if you do really well, you're going to get credit for being in the class. So
Cool, great, yeah, nice to meet you. No, I'm really excited about this. The last project was really exciting and it was really fun to work on it. So let's
what
hope
are your
this.
expectations?
Well, I expect to learn and I expect to like find different ways of like collaborating in this sort of like media environment, which is slightly different than last time. So it's really exciting.
Explain maybe a little bit about what is different, because you were very deeply involved in the last one, and you know that project might have an afterlife. I don't want to like jinx it by talking about it, but that project is going to have an afterlife, and it might get re-shown this year in a different space, right? Mm-hmm. So just like talk about that a little bit, because I think the two projects are very similar, right, in lots of ways.
So the way the other project was different is that it used technology that was very widely available. That was the Google reverse image search. So the images that the artist sent were then uploaded to the internet and reinterpreted by the algorithm, and it would show similar images. The artists sometimes were in charge of like finding the images that they found were fit through the algorithm, but more often than not, Mohammad and I wound up like finding those images. So they were put together, they were put in a wall, and it was actually kind of like this interesting space because it was sort of like a really old, beautiful building, and all the photographs were just printed with an inkjet printer, and they were just like stapled to the wall. There was absolutely covered. It was almost like a huge wallpaper of like reinterpreted images. But the interesting thing about it is that some of the artists were really, really involved into it, and they were thinking what that may have meant. So I think it was a really good like thought starter. Like people started feeling like inspired by it and started incorporating these ideas into their practices. So I thought that was quite a success in that sense.
Okay, so keep thinking about, because you were involved in the last project, you're going to be a valuable resource in terms of making sure that we don't repeat ourselves, right? That this exhibition actually goes forward rather than just play around the familiar territory, you know? Okay, Konstantin, do you want to tell us what are your expectations?
Yeah, hey everyone. Currently I don't know if I'm auditing or participating. I would like to, enroll normally. I don't know if I have the capability now. I will talk with Tony about that. Okay, first of all, I would really love to be in a class with you, Mo. I mean, every time we've been together in seminars, you always have this energetic feeling that somehow, you know, you manage to produce thoughts and you manage to energize. Secondly, I would like to see if curating is somewhat very close to architecture, let's say, or some kind of notion of architectonics in general, and understand better all those terms. And thirdly, hearing also the syllabus, I find it very close to some things that I'm working on. They're haunting me, and they're currently work in progress. I'm very interested in all those notions of the archive and all these Atlantic projects, let's say, of collecting and then doing and then injecting some intention in the process of collecting and then reiterating and then producing something different. So I have some things that are following me, for example, like Mnemosyne Atlas of Aby Warburg, which he's an ethnographer, he's a thinker, and he just gets in the process of collecting and let's say creating this giant archive. He becomes a machine.
Do you mind putting the name on the side? Because yeah. I don't think some of the people in the class are familiar with what you're talking about.
Okay.
Of course I am, because I was obsessed with him, and actually his work informed what I did at the American Museum of Natural History.
Okay.
Which we're going to visit and talk about, because the method I developed in Museum of Natural History is similar to what I'm hoping to develop with you guys. So it's interesting that you bring Warburg's name in the picture, because I was going to completely not talk about him. But now you're making me kind of like realize that like actually there's a Abby Warburg connection to what we want to do here, if the project wants to be successful.
I agree. I agree. It's a very solid reference, I think. And I don't know what else to say. I really think that we are in an era of, let's say, some kind of digital perversion or something, and if we won't be able to know what we do with ourselves, with our files, with our thoughts, then we're gonna be lost, more or less. So that's for start. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Kolja, we're gonna hear from you hopefully. Hello.
Yeah, we're here.
Hello.
We're here.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You can
Yeah,
both talk. You can talk separately. You don't have to talk like a choir, but go ahead.
Well, I guess that, I mean, we're talking to you from Berlin. We're visual artists. I had some curatorial experience before as well. Since 2011, we work as a collective. And coming to your project, I mean, I guess that there are quite a few questions that I would need to find answers before really being able to form an opinion on it. I think that technically speaking, it's going to be completely different to your previous project, because the amount of data that comes with the video footage is incomparably large to an image, and the larger, the bigger amount of data you have, actually, the more narrow your possibilities in finding an algorithm are. So I think also Prague would be a fantastic place to show such a project. There's a large history in Central Europe of different practices that do experiment with those kind of collective works, because what's going to ultimately happen if you merge several video works through one algorithm, you are going to end with some sort of video project that is going to lose like very distinct traces of authorship, which it is very similar to Oscar Hansen curriculum that was the program I studied with in Warsaw. So I think that there's a lot of interesting aspects that do really well fit to the place. I mean, to the art scene. I just have I don't have yet understanding towards the technological aspect of it, because I think it's going to be fairly difficult to. I think that the algorithm will have to do some fairly simple job in order not to cope actually with that footage. I'm also not sure if I understood correctly whether the different videos are going to be streamed together and mixed in this process, or each of them is going to be individually transformed by this algorithm.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Finish. I thought you done. Okay. Go ahead.
I'm also not sure whether this is supposed to happen live, or is that supposed to happen once, because also the processing of rendering of video image can also make it impossible to have that installation running live. So I guess that all that will have to be made before.
Now you're bringing like questions that I thought we will get into a little bit later. So I don't know if you want to like go through the list and finish everybody else's expectation from the class, because you have some technical questions, right? Most of what you brought up were technical, except the question of authorship, I would say. And yeah, so no, but I thought beside all the great things that you brought up, which we will address, personally, what do you expect to get from the seminar?
I don't know to what extent our expectations are formed. I mean, I've found the previous project very interesting. We do work a lot with questions of perception, and I guess the sort of perception of algorithms is something that we have to address in contemporary reality. I guess that we operate in the reality where over 70% of space is being used by bots and not by humans. So I guess that we are in the minority. So we do have to know how to communicate.
Okay, what about you, Kolja? You want to have a few words?
Yeah, that somehow also mirrors our thoughts. Yeah, when we briefly took a look in the first project, where there had been also some friends of us among the participants, we felt very interested and to bring that a step further, also including movies beside images that made us kind of curious. And that probably also made Josefina's questions coming up from a little bit more technical perspective.
They're great questions, actually. We're going to get to every single one of them. Now, you guys are practicing artists, so you seriously want to think about also if you want to participate in the exhibition, but we should really talk about that separate from the class, maybe in other Facebook conversations, because I'm kind of interested to see if you guys are actually also interested in participating in the project as artists who will submit digital images and or videos, or a single video as a collective, or a single image as a collective. Anyways, Joshua, it's your turn.
Hi. You'll have to forgive me. I'm kind of suffering from a cold right now. I guess one of my main expectations from this is to develop a sort of better arsenal and better learn how to be more tactical curatorially. And I think curation might be one of the largest motivators to sort of rekindle the development of the new and sort of escape this indeterminate, I think Jameson used the phrase retro mode. And I'm just interested in being more deliberately political with my work, and interested in developing the curatorial turn in music. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay, Jennifer is also only auditing. I don't know if she has any words to say, but let's go to Dylan. Dylan.
Yeah. Well, as far as what I'm looking to get out of this, I guess I'm a sort of artist in training and a wannabe theorist. I'm sort of an involuntary gap year before starting the MFA program, and I'm really fascinated in everything at the New Center, particularly the art classes. And this whole idea, this whole Suhail Malik critique of indeterminacy. I didn't actually know that we'd be getting into that in this course, but I guess I'm interested in, I don't know, interested in actually getting to the nitty-gritty of what determinacy looks like in functionality or in actuality, rather than determinacy as an ideal. Because up until now, I'm comfortable with the idea that we want to be more determinant, but I don't have a lot of a clear picture of what that looks like, what that means. Maybe.
Well, I'm hoping that we actually exercise it over these works, right? Where we can just assign value, where we can come up with multiple systems of measurements, right? In which somehow we can transform quality into quantity that then is understood by the algorithm, right?
Yeah, so I think it's super fascinating.
So basically, we will decide to devise overlaying multiple systems of measurements that together will work because the machine can handle all of them, right? My easiest example of that is how your credit score is measured, right? Like how all these different things you've done in the past with different varying importances and hierarchies interact together that then all get processed, and it gives you one single number, right? It says you work your credit is 790. You can qualify for a 5% a mortgage, or like your credit is like 480, we can't even give you anything. Actually, we're gonna come arrest you. Thank you for applying for this because you owe all this money here and there, right? So it's kind of like similar in a way, like mechanistically similar to that. Of course, it's much more complex than that, and it has nothing to do with like what the end result, right? But basically, that's kind of like what I'm hoping to do in terms of determinacy, right? Like we will exercise determinacy over these indeterminate submissions and then try to see what we can do with it. Now, should we get back to some of those questions that came up? Yes, it would be good. So I'm going to go back to Kolja's image because it's their question. Sorry, I did not get your name. I'm really sorry.
Yes. Josefina and
Josefina, yeah. The email was Josefina, actually. Okay, so I'm not going to answer Josefina's questions because it's Josefina and she's speaking from Berlin, and Berlin is the coolest place in the world, but because she actually brought up really good sort of like questions. In terms of the programmer, this is not a programmer. This is a programmer that basically it's actually a company. They're specialized already in what do you call it, like video image recognition. They have worked for several major, minor, medium-sized corporations. They've developed custom-made algorithms in terms of extracting what these customers want out of their videos, out of like single video or out of like multiple videos, and then combining them, right? So that's actually what kind of like made me be happy about this, because it's not just a programmer who has to learn everything from scratch and kind of like go by mistake. These are people who already dealt with like huge data sets coming from like, you know, traffic cameras of a city in which like things have to get sort of like separated, you know what I mean, and all sorts of like, you know what I mean, security cameras and all sorts of stuff, right? So that's one good thing, that like the person knows that like we're looking for a meaningful result, not just like, you know what I mean, because if you just put data on top of data, at the end you're just going to get like white noise, right? And it'll just be meaningless. So that's one good thing. The second thing is, no, we're not going to combine these videos and then feed them in. The whole point is that these videos will get processed, but in between getting combined, right? Some kind of like hierarchy that comes out of our own set of measurements will determine how much each one influences or determines the final image, right? So there's that we can build into the algorithm, right? So we can maybe like exaggerate the role of a certain image or video in terms of its role in the last one, or we can minimize it. We can say this element of this video, say movement in this video, is so fascinating that the movement from this video will be more determinate of the final image than say colors in the video, whereas another one, the colors are fascinating, so we're going to get more. So basically this is why this collective thinking and looking at these submissions and coming up with what we're going to do is very important. Now, it is going to be impossible to do it live. You're absolutely right. But what they're going to do is they're going to work with us with sample videos on what we give them, right? So then basically we can look at what we're getting, right, and fine-tune it and make it ready for the very final when we gather all the videos from the artists, and then they just run it once, and then it become kind of like we record that, and then they will play simultaneously as if it is live, okay? But what I really would like to do, and I don't know, is somehow we have to find a way, if it's possible, for the price that we're getting for the algorithm and all that, is to have one or two elements that comes from internet, that's aggregate from the internet, that can intervene in the final image and gives it a liveness. So imagine as the signals being projected, as a recorded signals being projected, it gets intervened by some other data sets that is live, and then determine it. But we have to work that and find a way in terms of like working with a database that's already live and changing all the time, and then basically connect that somehow back into this projection room in order to change this image, and then that thing will change all the time depending on what's happening with that data set live outside in the real internet world, right? Outside of the gallery in the internet world. So yeah, so I hope I answered your questions.
I think that this is possible as long as you don't want to have the video like drastically changed by the internet input. If you think of if you would be satisfied with having a layer on top of the video, then I have seen projects like that being made. It's literally like when you have an animation on the web page that just goes on a different layer, and therefore you don't have to render that in. So
yes, but wouldn't it be amazing if this data set actually completely screwed up with the image too? Because that would be also kind of like fascinating and amazing if we can afford it, and if the gallery can actually kind of like afford lines of communication and processing power for that to happen. Right now, I'm going to be in Prague on January 11th, right after our second class. I'm going to be in Prague, and then I'm going to basically do a lot of like intense meetings with the gallery people there to prepare the show, right? And then when we do our third session of the class, which is going to happen in the gallery, so the third class will happen while I'm there, right? We can actually discuss a lot of this. We'll get the kind of like between January 11 and January 19, I think, is the class, right? Or 16 is the class, right? 16. We basically can figure out a lot of this by then, because all the like other elements like budget, work with the programmer, all of that has come to place, and then we can kind of like see where we are. But yeah, but the third class I'll be like broadcasting from the gallery, and I don't know if you guys want to come hang out in Prague. Come, I have a nice hotel suite they've rented for me, and we can all party there and then go see. Oh, another thing that is also determined by me, and we're not going to change, is that the room where the videos are being shown, both rooms will be painted black. The video room will be that dark gray that is very beautiful for showing video, right? So I am not going to do white cube. The room where the videos are being shown is all going to be painted black. I've already done a show like that called Encyclonospace Iranica, and I love the black look. So no white cube. So these screens and monitors will all be in a 30, 40 of them, according to a number of artists that we managed to get into the show, will be all installed in a black room. But we can together think of ways to also deal with that, with how we want to do that. Once I'm in the gallery for the third session, we can kind of get into the logistics of the spatial aspect of the work. So that also kind of like something to discuss, right? Anyways, so Jennifer, do you want to speak or no? Because it would be rude if we don't let you even have a word.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's okay. Like I said, I'm just auditing, but I am interested in well, I work at a museum and I work in the curatorial department as an assistant. So
which museum?
Paris Art Museum, Miami.
Oh, lovely.
And I'm just, you know, I'm always looking forward to classes at the new center just to look at new experimental ways of thinking, and I'm interested in this class basically so I'll sit back and just watch you guys.
I gotta get you to sign some non-disclosure agreements. No, I'm kidding.
But yeah, I'm interested in new experimental ways of thinking about curating, and I'm also in this period in my life that I'm questioning what is curating, why am I doing here, what is this, what I want. So this will be interesting to see this project develop me, and you know, using this new innovative way of curating a show. So I'm looking forward to it.
So now I'm gonna go back to a couple of things. First thing is, I'm gonna like set a kind of like harsh dialectics here, which I think the show itself can very much be about. One is coming from people, particularly like people affiliated with my friends, accelerationists and rationalists, who think there are ways to sort of like make sense of the chaos of data. We just have to approach it with the proper concept and proper plans in order to approach the data that we collect from the world, the given world, right? The other end of that opposite are people like Alexander Galloway, which I have immense respect for and I've worked with in the past, and who think that the enormity of this data renders it impossible to actually deal with. For him, every picture, every image of the internet is a cauliflower. All data visualizations, they all say the same thing, which is the impossibility of data to mean anything. Other friends of mine who stand on this end of things are like Anna Pinto, the writer, educator, and thinker who lives in Berlin. She also following Galloway, thinks that it's impossible to do anything productive with data, right? So I think we should not really, I don't want to take a side in this dialectic, and I want this show to sort of like the essay for the show that I will write, or any kind of like text output that you guys might end up having in the catalog, should really kind of like assume that the starting point is basically dealing with this dialectic. Is it possible to actually synthesize this information and come up with something? And what we come up with, what kind of value does it have? And B, is this impossibility as like, is the show going to end up being just like a perfect, beautiful, gorgeous example of this impossibility, right? So basically, this is like very important to keep in mind. This like sort of like this argument, this like tension between these two sides, right? Now, go ahead.
I think very much related to that is something I was thinking when you were speaking just about 10 minutes earlier. That the question of an algorithm reads all these the collection of videos, spits out the synthesis, but then you were talking about the potential for a live internet
intervention.
Intervention, right? And I mean, I have seen some work that really actually goes beyond the trivial. Getting a feed of some subsection of a derivatives market and interacting with the music. And this was like a super collider composer. Super Collider is a computer program for music.
Could you please put down whatever you're talking about, sir? Put it down in the sidebar so we can actually look into these possibilities and think about them later.
And the implication with that is like to do with like interaction and like something I found in my work where it's like response games to environment states. There's two ways of doing that. There's ways where the human response affects the environment, and there's ways that no matter what the human response does, the environment isn't really affected. So, like, if you have just in my experience, just with what I've personally done, if you have a pseudo-random algorithm creating environment states and the performer is instructed to respond to the environment states, that's a very different thing if another performer is creating the environment states for that performer, because then you're in positive feedback. And if you have, if one performer is a computer who is not listening to you, you don't really have positive feedback. And those are two just very different things, and different ways of working. But I certainly see the same thing going on, because like once you have the algorithm and you have the set of videos, that might not be really positive feedback per se, if depending on how the algorithm changes throughout its synthesis, throughout its running. On the other hand, you can always find ways to increase positive feedback. And yes, as we've said, it can get trivial if you just have all positive feedback all the time. But
I think you have your Facebook message board sound on, and your Facebook keeps messaging you, right? Is that what it is, or is my machine?
I got one Hangout message. I didn't get a Facebook sound.
Okay, no problem. I don't know. I have my Facebook sound off, but for some reason I hear like a kind of maybe it's your Hangout message. Anyways, please make some notes for us about what you just brought up on the sidebar, so we can actually like continue on these threads.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a few other things to talk about if there is no comment at this point. Anybody wants to say something? Okay. So Konstantin brought up the question of architecture and curatorial, right? last Saturday, in our eFlux conference, we're uploading all the like talks. The talk that really going to be useful for our discussion here, especially what Konstantin like brought to the class, is a talk given by my dear friend and curator of architecture at Guggenheim Museum, Troy. Troy talked about the inseparable relationship between architecture and computation. Of not just metaphorically, right? Like how the word architecture was incorporated into like the language of computation, not just like about how building systems like hardware is like architecture, but all sorts of other connections between the two, right? And he's a curator, so it's very interesting to hear a curator talks about. He basically gave this unbelievable like sort of like video slide presentation, and the images were so well synced with what he was saying, and I'm hoping that like he will make that video also available to the new center members, in which he kind of like illustrated this like really like fascinating sort of like history between computer design, system thinking, and architecture. And for him, basically, world making begins with architecture and then ends with computers. So now there's another relationship here which we can basically think of and talk about, which is sort of like the curatorial relationship with both architecture and with computation. Because in a cynical sense, and I'm going to first talk about the cynical sense of it, right? In the cynical sense, what the curatorial practice has turned into these days is a very rudimentary basic algorithm, which often involves the head curator will basically come up with a core number of artists that are going to be in this major biennale or major group show or major survey show of basically even a single artist, right? If it's a single artist, but I'm mostly talking about group shows like biennales, right? So the curator comes up with like the core list of people, and then basically tell the team members to go find, for each artist, find 10 or 15 other artists whose work somehow relate to these people, either aesthetically, in terms of material, in terms of concept, in terms of issues they address, and then basically then they bring all those artists in as potential participants in the show. With the help of the chief curator, they would draw up a map of how these work interrelate to basically give the vision of the curator, and that becomes a show. To me, this kind of curatorial work will soon be completely replaced by machines, because machines are becoming smart enough to do this kind of work. You could easily just plug in 5 or 6 major names and tell your machine to go find the rest, and then go get a coffee and come back and you have your show, right? So in this sense, you see the curatorial work in a cynical sense is becoming more and more sort of like algorithmic and computational, even in its own trajectory, coming from like data and surrealist shows in 1920s and 30s to now. But there's another sense in which basically what a curator does is basically turn the quality of the work in some kind of, turn it into some kind of quantity that is measurable and understood in a very matter-of-factly, commonsensical way to the general public. So all the creativity, craziness, you know, like vagueness, whatever happens on the side of the art and the artists who make the art, by the time it comes to the space of the gallery and the custodian, the curator, takes charge of it, from this moment on, it's a matter of, okay, how now it's going to make sense. Now all of a sudden things have to become what? Very boring, very normal. Things like, you hardly see curators do stuff that are like vague and alienating, because that's not what the curator does. The curator kind of makes sense of the vagueness of the artist's work, or put certain vaguenesses together, so together they start making sense towards something. That's basically very much like a job of an architect also, like to kind of like bring in different elements and make a utilitarian, useful space for something out of it that's actually going to be used. So this is I think something that my practice kind of like at least when I'm doing shows, tries to kind of like resist a little bit, tries to not so much give in to this desire to have perfect labels, perfect explanations, to make these kind of like, I mean, to make them understandable, but at the same time, not be indeterminate, because that's another thing. I don't like the indeterminacy. So how to not be indeterminate, but at the same time not to be sort of like make sense the way the wall text and a curator's kind of make sense, right? How to build as an architect a space that not only is useful, but it makes you think. And it may not actually, part of it may not even be that useful, except that they make you think, right? And to me, for me, basically, the work of the I'm into integrating the work of the curator and the work of the artist into the same. I would like to take those barriers down and find a middle way in which, and to me, that is part of the determinacy that I like to exercise, is to blur the line between the job of the artist and the job of the curator. And I don't know if you guys have looked into my CV or not. I come from an artist background. My undergrad degree is art, and I'm getting back into showing work because I think it's valuable to sort of like not give up on my practice as an artist. So I'm actually kind of like looking for venues to show work, and I want to show my art beside doing projects. And then I heard from people, a lot of people refer to the for machine use only show as an artist project, and they said this is not curatorial. What you did there was an art project. It was your art project. You're an artist, and what you did was you work with other artists. And there's a history of artists working with other artists. You don't need to call that curatorial practice. And I just shake my head and go like, well, maybe I guess that's why the blurring of this line is something good, and that maybe I've taken a small step towards that, right? So I also want this project itself to be another step in that direction of kind of like blurring the line between the two, sort of like redefining what computation means, what architecture means, what curatorial means, keeping in mind the crazinesses of the archives like that of Abby Warburg. Because to me, what Abby Warburg did with that library is really like inspiring, because what he did was he created an image archive, but the way he associated these images had nothing to do with what was known back then as an archival practice, or the way you would classify images together. His goal was other stuff, and he wanted to use ordinary images of today in conjunction with images of art history in order to come up with a different understanding of the history of Western art, particularly the area he was interested in, which is the Renaissance era. And his archive, which Constantine talked about, which is held in London at some institution, basically is a testament to how you can kind of like do other types of computation, which is very much like you're still computing, but not in the way that we understand what computation is, coming from computer science. And my project with the American Museum of Natural History was sort of like inspired by that, because if we go and look at it, which hopefully we'll have time to do because it's very important, because I came up with 4 or 5 different types of measuring images, which then informed how these images were pulled up on search engines, and how by using this different system you could see things that normally you would not see in a certain data set. So that's one thing that I really wanted to talk about. The other thing that I really want to talk about at like getting into the class is like a lot of what the infrastructure of indeterminacy in art is actually a very determinate bureaucracy. This bureaucracy, which we can call the bureaucratization of art, actually comes from the 3 sectors that normally support art. The pedagogical infrastructure, which is a university, art school, art history, all that. Then the governmental support that art gets through funding and through sort of like all these sorts of government agencies that facilitate production and dissemination of art. And then the corporate bureaucracy, which shows itself through corporate sponsorship of shows and also the vast art market that has kind of like bubbled around the art, right? So you have these three-sided interest in bureaucracy that's kind of like engulfing the art of today and forcing it to kind of like remain vague on the surface, but actually be very particular in terms of what it tries to achieve behind the scene. And this determinacy of the bureaucracy shows itself in these languages that are formed around discussion about art, these types of like art languages, these types of like discourses. And the way it shows itself in the art is a research-based practice, right? Like the predominancy of research-based art is itself hasn't been enough research done on it, hasn't been enough reflection on it. But like for a lot of us, we did a conference last year in Graz, Austria, which the question was like the value of artistic research. A lot of us sort of like came to this conclusion that this term has outlived its life, and actually we need to critique it, and we need to bring it down, and we need to kind of like find ways to kind of like let artists break out of this thing, because this is a bureaucratic mold imposed on art by its sort of like infrastructural sort of like support out of government, education, and finance, or corporation, or private sector, whatever you want to call it. So I would also like to keep that in mind, that like I'm hoping that what we do together here does not fall into this either trap of artistic research or like the term research. I hope we can just like not even use the word research as much as possible in any other stuff that has to do with the show, and basically think of it as sort of like, or reinvent what research means again, like what we were saying with Abby Warburg. Reinvent what we really mean by research, and find a way to define artistic research, which is more than just, as Julieta Aranda puts it, artists borrowing information or knowledge from fields, using it without really properly returning anything back to that field, you know, or returning anything back to anyone, as a matter of fact. So
just a super quick clarification. Would you kind of generalize philanthropy into that corporate register?
Yeah, totally. The languages that are evolved around that totally shows itself, right? The way philanthropy talks about art is very matter-of-factly and makes sensey, and it's always about kind of like, you know, like people go see art, and like that number of people go to the museum, blah, blah, blah. We need to like raise fund because of da-da-da-da, right? Like, on the level of the art, you go see the art and it's all weird and vague and doesn't make sense, right? But if you pick up the brochure of the support, it sounds like any other kind of like thing you've read in the world, right? Yeah. And you're left wondering how to reconcile these two, right?
Sure. So would you say research as a paradigm is a consequence of the value system?
Yeah, it's like artists internalizing the urge to produce paperworks. Paperworks to legitimize what they're doing.
Sure.
If I may order a token, actually, if I may add something.
Yeah. Yes.
A lot of the
philanthropic
text that you see. Give me a second. I don't know if I have good internet. Like a lot of the problem with the philanthropic scope in terms of art writing is that there is a clear necessity to pretend that the art does way more than it actually does. And I think it is actually particularly that sense, especially in the States, not so much in Britain or in other countries, that there is this sort of like emphasis that the art has to be doing something for the society in order to justify philanthropic donations. So I think philanthropy plays a particular role in the way that art claims to do big things, but actually fails at it often. Hello?
Hello? No, yeah. We're listening. I'm listening.
Yeah. So that was sort of like what I wanted to say, that these sort of claims are really hooked into philanthropic language, and even like the language that the government adopts when they present big exhibitions in non-museum spaces, which happens quite often in places like Colombia. It's also like a language of like giving, transformation of society, or all sorts of like scopes that pretend to do a lot, but actually like in actuality never quite achieve it.
Or the language government use in order to justify spending money on art. It's very like, it's a bureaucratic discourse. But anyways, now the way this relates to our own project is that the claims we are going to make about this project, right, is to be wary of, like, I am not really interested in trying to already decide that this project's going to be useful, or this project's going to have any kind of like measurable sort of like research value, or measurable thing that is along the lines of these types of rationalization that we've already seen coming from market, government, and educational institutions, right, around art, right? So that's why I think keeping that dialectic between data visualization is impossible, and yes, there are ways to animate it and make it useful, alive. Keep that alive, because at the end of the day, I want to refuse and resist like making claims about this project being somehow beneficial to the society, or beneficial to, I don't know, like some kind of like measurable goal by general public, or it brought that many number of people to the gallery, blah blah blah. So this is how this sort of like bureaucracy and research fits into the project that we're initiating. Okay.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Now, I don't know if you guys have the syllabus in front of you, but if you don't, what I like you to do is, and you know what I mean, Manuel's very key here, right? And he's going to set up the spreadsheet and all that for it. I want you to skim over these. All of them are online sources. I did not give you anything that like it requires buying anything. My own text is all online. There's a bunch of my own work. There's bunch of other people's texts that are relevant to these questions that we're going to address in this show, right? So basically, please go over them. You can mix and match and use whatever you want. You can even like borrow sources from additional sources, which are like our own internal journal, #, eFlux, or our friend Joshua Johnson's site called Uberty, right? There are lots of amazing sources there, right? But what I want you to do is, I want you to think of 3 pieces out of all these. Doesn't have to be all mine or any of them mine, but it wouldn't hurt if you guys pick something I've done, because we're gonna like work on developing things for the catalog together, and it would be nice to see some continuity. Think of doing something with 3 of these texts together in terms of like writing, presenting, or at least get like, what I want you each to do is like in the next class, which is January 9th, right? I want you to do a 5-minute presentation on sort of like your ideas for the show based on these texts, and actually telling us which text you read so we can mark those texts off. And so if I need to go back to those texts, I know who to go to and say, hey, what was in that text, right? So pick 3 of the texts and come to class with 5-minute presentation, and basically culminating in one idea that is yours. Okay? So consider this like assignment 1, but it's basically your only sort of like non-practical practicum assignment, because the rest of it is actually like dealing with the show, right? So make sure you don't forget that 3 of the texts and 5-minute presentation, and then Kolja and Josefina can of course do 1 presentation, just 1 5-minute with 1 idea, because they're participating as a collective. So I don't expect you guys to do 2. And we should be able to wrap that up in an hour with the number of people we have in a class, right? And it will be really useful to show that like we went over the material, and also like make sense of what out of this material you find useful in this in the reading for the show. What you find useful in the readings for the show. So that is sort of like, please make note of that. And Manuel Correa will be your friend and your guest. The group message I created in Facebook should be good enough for basically kind of communicating, all of us communicating together with those few people that are not in the class but might join us in the second session and all that. So basically that's about it. Now, another thing I was going to bring up is like this really prevalent trend in curatorial work these days, which is sort of like, you can call it overstuffing, overburdening the exhibitions by curators. And it has so many different reasons why a show gets overburdened, which means ends up with too many ideas, too many artists, too many objects, too many of everything, and then you walk in and you're overwhelmed. And for me, this does not work because we already have the internet. It's all, to me, it's all negative impacts of thinking like internet in the space of art. You go to a show and you go like, I don't need to see an archive. I can already see this online. You're not doing anything with this that is useful or anything new productive with it that internet already doesn't do, right? So we have to keep that also in mind when we're working on this show, that like we don't want to end up overburdening, and we don't want to recreate the internet. We already have the internet. We already have data. We already have a lot of people working in these paradigms. How to kind of like not only remain original with this project, but to actually do something that's productive and useful and come up with things that are actually going to add to the discourse of art, rather than just like another project that fill up some empty hole in some calendar of some gallery or something. Now, the show also has a conference component. I am not fully in charge of the conference. I'm one of the 3 people in charge of the conference, but I'm in charge of the show single-handedly, right? So I'm the curator of the show and a co-curator of the conference. I'm also a guest in the conference, and I'm going to do a paper for the conference. Now, the third component of this is a catalog. There's a budget for a really nice bilingual catalog to be produced for the show. And the catalog itself is a site of intervention, that somehow the project that we're doing can be reflected in the catalog. First of all, what we're going to work together, and this requires dividing up the artists into like dividing you guys into groups and working on things, or dividing the list of artists between individual ones, because what I really wanted the show to have is very simple artist bios and very simple description of the videos, right? And we would divide up those tasks among each other, and it will be that's why the practicum is actually part of the course's practicum, is that these couple of bio sentences and very short descriptions are what we're going to work with in order to come up with those systems of measurement. Our measurement systems will come from us looking at these works and evaluating them and sort of like giving them sort of like a place in our measurement order, right? So yeah, so think of that as the other assignment, which is sort of like dealing with what goes from the show in the catalog. Now, whatever of it doesn't get done with a class, I'll just do myself. I'm a workaholic, and I love working on catalogs and stuff. I agreed to be the designer of the catalog to save the fees of the designer so we can have more money for the project. So I'm the designer, and I'm actually currently designing the look of the catalog. And maybe by next class, I can show you sort of like mock-ups of the cover, mock-ups of the pages, how I want to like see it. And it's actually going to be like about 100, 150-page book. And they want to get a translator and translate it, right? So it's great if you want to actually write something on this matter and have it in the catalog and have it translated. Guess what? If your text is good, and as long as we have it by the time class ends, it is possible to do so. So if you really want to participate on a level of writing, you just have to start planning it now. Let me know, so I will discuss your names with the team in Prague, get you approved, and then waiting for your text to come, see if your text is good, editable, usable or not, just a basic process that texts go through before publication, right? But you have to start thinking about your participation as an artist and as a writer in a catalog early enough, so then we can plan you in the project, okay? So keep that in mind. And these all, of course, works towards your sort of like passing the course. And of course, these options are available to people that are registered in a class, and you guys know who you are. Anyway, so any other question you guys have before I want to like get into the lecture mode and give you the core essay that I'm developing for the show? Hello? Everybody
Yeah.
can hear me, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. So
I do have a question that you and me can address some other time, just about like Europe, because I'm actually going to Europe in a couple weeks, and I have like I might have an obligation the next class period because I'll be in Europe, but we'll talk.
January, you mean you be in Europe on January 9th?
Yes, and I have a residency off some island in Portugal from the 3rd to the 13th, so maybe I can like get my flight pushed back and like get to Prague for like a day or two around
Sure.
the 15th, the 16th, so that kind of stuff.
But your residency does not have internet, right? So you won't be able to attend the class?
I think the residency might have internet. I just might like have to like be attending a concert or a lecture or a workshop or
I
something.
see what you mean. Well, let me and let Manuel know ahead of time so we know if we're expecting you or not.
Yeah, for sure.
That's all. So any other question?
Yeah, I wanted to raise a mark on the cynical side you noted on while you said about let's say the art world and institutions and stuff, and in relation to the architectonics, and I don't know, this is somehow of a point I have been thinking, but if you see from journals to exhibitions to actions or whatever, you can see, let's see, a fragmented thematization, let's say, that things are done purely out of habit, let's say. So, for example, you're a journal and you just post topics and you call people to do stuff according to those topics, but without any thought about the final constellation, let's say, that is going to be produced. So it's just a scattered pile of things that you may find really, I don't know, gold stuff in there, but and hidden. But the general project and the general desire behind those, I believe, is missing. And I don't want to sound postmodern and say, I don't know, let's design desire or something, but I believe that's a missing aspect in terms when we talk about collections, archives, editing. How does the tag or the thematic stand in a general picture of a more general project, let's say, and how does this indeed give to this effort, let's say? So I believe that it connects more or less with what you said, but that was
Absolutely. I mean, I can try to give you an answer or something, but to me, I like to go concrete, right? I don't know, those of you who are in Europe, like Kolja and Josefina, did you guys get a chance to see the Venice Biennale this year?
Yes, we've seen it.
Yes, you saw it, right? So
yeah, I mean, as much as one can see it.
So you went through the Arsenale, right?
Yes.
Okay, it's good because I really wish somebody here had seen it, because my experience of it was that it was just too stuffed. It was like a second-hand store of stuff. It was way too much stuff there, way too much stuff with similar color schemes, similar things, and basically the label and the catalog essay tried to make sense of it, just like what Konstantin was saying. But actually there was a disconnect because not that the claims made in the catalog were not verifiable, but the immensity of the show and the amount of crap that was filled into the room made it impossible for me as the viewer to actually exercise judgment over what I saw in the show or experienced versus what was being said in the wall labels and the catalog. So I'm not even saying that he didn't do anything. I'm just saying that I could not evaluate it. I was just like, oh my God, this is too much. Why do we have to have 4 artworks that are basically very similar to each other, and they're from artists from the same epoch, like age-wise and all that? Why didn't you take 3 out and just put 1 and give it a little bit of space around it so I can actually kind of like contemplate it? You know, that was one of my largest critiques of. And then the opposite show was Jan Vo's show at the foundation. I don't know if you got a chance to see that one, across the water at like the Prado. No, it's not Prado Foundation, but like what is the guy's name? The Pinot, the Francois Pinot's foundation. Because Dan.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. I mean, but do you feel that that, let's say, the exhibition in Arsenale and the previous Venice Biennale was less stuffed? I feel that the Arsenale is always this place where way too many things are being put in this too small box, and I guess that the purpose of this exhibition was to kind of reinsert into art history certain missing artists, and that in particular certain African artists. I feel that has been done extremely unsuccessful, because usually in the room where those African artists were inserted, the works were the weakest ones. So one could have a feeling after watching it that they were omitted because of the low quality of the work, which I think was right the opposite of what the curator wanted to achieve with this exhibition. But I felt that as much as I generally never enjoyed an exhibition in Arsenale, I feel that there were a few rooms that were interesting, and I think that there were also, from room to room, you could actually have a feeling of entering completely different exhibition. I don't know if you remember the room where Ritrit Trashevana work was shown, the ongoing performance with the bricks, and then there was I forgot the name right now, an artist based in Zurich right now. There was a poetry reading opposite to that, and there were maybe like 2 more works in a quite large room. I felt that room, for instance, had a very nice proportion of kind of life activity and the object, and it kind of made sense without taking a look into any text written in a catalog or on the wall. But I think that generally the project of an international exhibition within Venice Biennale is a project that has to experience a failure, because it is simply impossible to do something that fits all the expectations and remains an interesting and intellectually coherent show. And it is also presented on the backdrop of something that is incredibly redundant today, which would be the national pavilions. So I think that this exhibition is quite. I would have a problem using the Venice Biennale exhibition, Arsenale curated show, as a point of reference for any other practice, because I think that the circumstances are so extremely bizarre that does not really translate to any other experience.
But I brought that up because it is something that, like, it's a measurable. It happens every 2 years. There's a consistency in it, but the same argument could be made about other shows, other survey shows, and group shows that happens. Often you'll get these, particularly new museum shows, which is interesting. You brought up Massimiliano's show, because that show also suffered from overstuffiness 2 years ago in Venice, but also some of other Massimiliano's show I've seen. I can name many of them, like Rosemary Truckle's solo show, or the Arab show they did last year. I have the catalog here. It was called Here and Elsewhere. Too stuffed. But I think Massimiliano's show at the Biennale, with the help of architecture, I think he did something a little bit different, which is he thought of the space a little bit more creatively than this show. That the way you walked in the rooms and the way you walked around the space gave you this kind of sense of coherence. And also, in terms of what he was doing, he was almost doing the same thing, except rather than trying to insert like lesser known artists in art history, he was trying to do like non-artists or like folk artists who never had a place in the discourse of art because they came into art from like they weren't even making art, some of them, right? And place them in they were cartoonists, or they were just like people who made stuff at home in the garage, right? Place them in the discourse of art. And I think actually if that was what Massimiliano's show did, it was much more successful than this show with what you brought up in terms of like inserting certain African artists in the history of art. But we shouldn't dwell too much on this because we have a lot of other work to do which has to do with our own exhibition. So let me just see my note. Yeah. So basically, the thing to keep in mind is that from this discussion about our show is that we don't want to do this overstuffing, but then we also don't want to do that emptiness that was the key to the success of Jan Vo's show, because that's what Jan Vo did Across the Water. He curated a show of almost the size of the Arsenale, maybe a little bit smaller, but with very few artists and with very few art objects. And it was, even though you could say it was also kind of like nonchalant, but it actually, experience of it was much more pleasant. And it made a lot of people go like, oh my God, this is my favorite show of the year. I came to Venice to see this one, maybe, because this is so much more successful. But the only trick that he exercised in that was literally leaving empty spaces between works and kind of like allowing you to walk for a minute or two away from one art. You literally had to walk 2 or 3 minutes to get to the other art, right? So Quinn, you're double, and I'm gonna have to mute you. Thank you for muting yourself. Yeah, so having said that, now I want to like basically get into like the lecture mode, if you guys don't mind. The paper I'm going to present to you is going to like add one more layer to the project, and this is an idea I think I want to put on the table. It's totally debatable, and we can use it or not. It's not part of like the predetermined set of things that the exhibition come with, and that is like what I like to consider we doing with our judgment and with the algorithm is sort of like if you can think of it as a form of curatorial blockchain, right? Which means somehow if there's after I read my paper, we can maybe discuss it. But like the paper is about looking at the model of blockchain for I mean the paper is actually not about curatorial or not about this show, but I think this is the central thing that I'm putting on the table to consider with you guys collectively to see if we can make this one of the themes of the exhibition, basically. But we can discuss it after I give the lecture. Okay, are we ready? Can I get into the mode? Okay, so here we go. Also, while my file opens, also for the next class, we're going to have a guest, which is Bassam Al-Baroni. He was the curator of one of the 2 shows affiliated with Ashkal Alwan's Homework 7 in Beirut. He curated a show that, at least in terms of its material substrate, is very similar to what we are trying to do. It involved a lot of screens and a lot of monitors and a lot of digital information. Most of the show was basically consisted of digital information, including the piece that I put in the show, because I was invited to contribute to the show. So Bassam will be with us next week as our curator guest, and I will disseminate information about Homework 7 to you prior so you can look at it, and then he will do a small presentation of the show, and then we can maybe discuss to see if there's anything we can learn from Bassam in terms of showing large data sets and lots of screens and video projectors in our own project. Okay, so in this paper, I'm experimenting with a different speculative format, something I like to call science nonfiction. Even though science nonfiction shared with its namesake, science fiction, the objective of world making, the latter is more similar to design, for which models of non-existent or unknown entities are constructed and judged based on their function, not on how they accommodate the plot. However, unlike design, for which the challenge of invention is material and physical, in science nonfiction, capturing a new machine is more a logical and ideal task. But this positive project should not obscure the fact that every utopian imagination should also include its own nightmare in addition to its dreams. Kind of like that dialectic we were talking about earlier. One might still argue that much of these operations already take place in science fiction. But my point is that the most intense form of science nonfiction can only occur, their most intense form can only occur in science nonfiction, where stakes are higher and the assumption of disbelief, in opposed to what we already know as suspension of disbelief, makes audience persuasion much harder. The story would not make sense if I don't explicitly speak about the orientation of the temporality of this project. I hope we can agree that all speculations, to some degree, are simulations of distant times and spaces which are realized and then transformed virtually in the stretched fabric of the present time. The form of virtuality we will experiment with involves a historical trajectory unlike the typical one we are accustomed to based on the accepted philosophies of history. The number one accepted philosophy of history being history as the archaeological object worthy of unearthing and burnishing, and the second is history as the reconfiguration of the past and for the present moment. So the second one is associated with like Benjamin's philosophy of history. Thus, for this project to make sense, I'd like to propose a different conception of history, as suggested by Iranian philosopher Reza Negarestani, a philosophy of history in which the future returns to the past in order to take part in determining its own destiny. The science fiction example for this form of historical temporality is a movie like Terminator or even 12 Monkeys. So even though it might seem that we are following the normal course of past, present, future, the subject of our project is traversing this space only after coming back in time in the first place, right? So even if we're moving from past, present, future, it's because we've already returned from the future to re-go through the process. So it's the second, even if it looks like we're going through the past, present, future, it's because we've already returned from the future and now we're going through it one more time. We can consider my proposition here in terms of its relationship to other things and ask if there are related and more tangible examples of science nonfiction in the world. My short answer is yes. For example, the accelerationist political demands like full automation and universal basic income, or in fact any other utopian impulse in which the ferocity of imagination is balanced with an insistence on practicality. The other function of our story is providing a radically different account of the evolution of the self-realization of human mind as it bootstraps itself beyond its biological platform into other material substrates like our planetary computational infrastructure. So you can kind of see how the move from the artist videos into this other mode could be about this shift. This configuration looks at artificial intelligence not as an alien force or as the other to humanity, the image we repeatedly encounter in science fiction, but science fiction as a new form of clothing for our mind and its expanding desires and capabilities. I really wish you could stop this sound from coming, but I have no idea where it comes from. I'm going to close this window. Maybe it comes from here. Hopefully it'll go away. I think so. I think we dealt with it. Okay. So artificial intelligence not as an other to human, but as a new form for the continuation of the project of humanity. In our project, the categorical lines separating humans from nature and machine will be blurred, if not arbitrary, and can only be useful if these distinctions are reestablished in a way that will further our ability to understand and transform the world. So if we're going to make distinctions between human and machine, if we're going to make distinction between these images on in one room and then the other one, it's only to further our understanding of how we're going to transform the world. They're not just categorical distinction just to create more ontological baggage in terms of what is the human and what is technology and what is art and what is this that. Our project also only makes sense if you understand the logic of technogenesis, or the intertwined evolution of biology and technology, or nature and culture, largely in terms of bootstrapping, which ensures that every new development, besides being an independent stage on its own, functions also as a literal bridge to the stages that come after. This might explain why the cybernetic accommodation of the rise of the owners-managers class in the 20th century has itself been a regressive but a dialectical necessity towards an emancipatory future. One thing for sure, the pyramidical configuration of power with human owners and managers / professionals on the top could not remain eternally in the kind of homeostatic equilibrium imagined for it by the pioneers of cybernetics, and that technology, as the essential fruit of the human mind, would step by step bootstrap itself to the existing human in order to brutally transcend all of humans' limitations. So here, I would like you to think of the curator as this manager, right? Of how what we're setting up is sort of like exercising, like, I mean, this is utopian, of course, exercising one last act of curatorial in which the curators basically replace themselves with the algorithm and remove themselves from forever from the process, so things can happen without curators, right? Any questions so far?
No, I just think it's brilliant, and I'm resisting picking a side or showing I'm picking a side or implying that you're picking a side when it comes to the dialectic between like the Galloways and the Nagaristanis, you know, where, and because when you frame that dialectic, you said we're not necessarily picking a side, but I just find myself, as I always have, you know, so much more sympathetic to the view where like, go for it, you know, like we can try to make sense of it, I suppose. But like I said, I should resist taking a side, as you said.
Okay, so what do you like? So how can you take side but keep the other one in mind, right?
Sure, that makes that certainly makes a lot of sense. I just don't think I don't think any notion of positive feedback is possible if it's just if the noise is overwhelming. I think when on just specifically on the level of like, you know, the relationship between the future and the present, like to create positive feedback there, you know, and to come up with some like, you know, optimistic method in like, you know, kind of like Nick Cernusek way. Like, you can't accept that it's like overwhelming and you'll never navigate it, you know? At the same time, it's very difficult, and you're not 100% sure. That's just kind of where my sympathies are. But I think the paper's brilliant. I actually hope are they notes and you don't want to send them out yet? Or
Well, you mean my paper? No, I'll share what I have with you guys at the end of the class. No problem.
Great.
But it's a work in progress, and I'm hoping to add and extract things from it, and then maybe this will become my catalog essay.
Mm-hmm.
But I really want to plug in what you guys will read and bring in to the class, just like how grad seminars usually work, right? Professor, bring an idea, throw it in the class, ask people to further research it, and then some of those results might end up in the paper, and then you guys might borrow something from the paper and do something for your own writing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any other question, guys? Okay, so I'm going to continue. Okay, go ahead.
How is this algorithm is going to be applied? Like, who is going to write it?
We're gonna have a program. In fact, I have two kind of like I'm asking two different group of programmers who have dealt with this kind of stuff to give us quotes, but we have a budget for it, and we'll pick somebody who is more competent and is willing to work with us, knowing that this is not a utilitarian project. We're not trying to like identify criminals in the videos, and we're not trying to like count the number of cars that go by, or we're not gonna like, I don't know, like live manipulate videos, because you know what I mean. There's a lot of this stuff is being done for, as I said, for utilitarian use, right? So one of the two companies that is more accommodating, understanding the artistic nature of the project, and also willing to work for less money because they have some kind of interest in kind of like showing that their skills are applicable to the world of art, will end up doing it. But we will have more detail by January 9th for sure, because I have to make up my mind who's going to do it for how much amount of money and all that. Go ahead.
It's like this exposition in New York. You went. It's all green screens, and it's like a room from the future, a house from the future.
Yeah, I saw it. I posted it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of.
It was in Swiss Institute.
Yeah, that also works with algorithms? Like it's randomly.
No, that one really would. That one actually very simple. It actually doesn't work with algorithms. It just works with green screen, which means like it green screens you in the room you're in, and then the video you see already has what's green screened on it. So then you're in a green screen. So certain objects that are not green screen are in real, but they're also in a video. And then certain part of it that is green screen is replaced by some other video. And then if you're wearing green, the part of your body that's green disappear, and then parts of the other thing show. So it was like this really interesting way of mixing in like virtual, real, and pre-recorded. So
okay.
I mean pre-arranged, like the objects in the room, right? Pre-arranged, pre-recorded, and virtual. Kind of mix it all together. Actually, if you want to like, how many of you are familiar with a show that Christian Markley's latest show? I think he's with Andrea Rosen, right? I'm not sure. Josefina, you know the project I'm talking about?
No, I'm afraid I don't know the project.
Oh yeah, you mean you're probably thinking of the Time Project, right? The monumental movie project, right? Where he kind of like took time out of every movie that was referring to a particular minute, and then he made a clock out of it, right? It's called the clock, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of similarity with the clock, right? You see the similarity with the clock, right? But the look of the second room really is like, I'm totally like was inspired by his latest show in New York, which like he kind of like seamlessly projected this animation in 4 sides of a wall. And I have a video of it on my Facebook. If you guys search for Christian Markley on my page, you'll find a video. It was this fascinating way in which these like characters and letters and elements out of comic books, kind of like zoomed in and out, like it was just like I was gonna throw up. It was so overpowering. But basically, what I like to take out of that show, you guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What I like to borrow from that show is like the way it dealt with four-sided video in a room that make this kind of like immersive video environment in which all four walls are covered with the same kind of like image. In our case, so far, I'm thinking is going to be two video projectors that are basically are somehow connected and create this seamless environment. It might end up being four projectors, which means our data somehow has to be split into four, and like basically four groups of videos, and then to provide four. But I think we can do it with two, because I think the gallery has two really high-res, amazing, like, you know, $50,000 projectors that can really deliver the quality of the image that I'm after. So, getting back to the paper. Okay, Konstantin, do you want to like ask your question?
Yeah, I cannot elaborate much more than that, but what I have understood so far is that you're talking about a context where you use a set of automatization tools, let's say, that actually do the curating, but the basic thing to do is how to use those things and deploy them. I don't know if that makes sense, but I wanted to clarify that we're talking about.
Well, this is the argument, right? In the blockchain argument, the argument is that we're removing the third party, right? And you do direct transactions, right? And then the people who critique it, they say, well, you remove the third party, but the blockchain and the algorithm itself is the third party. So you always have a third party. All transactions are being mediated by the blockchain. So you haven't actually removed third party. You've replaced the third party, right? So in our case also, that's how I can answer your question. It's that it's not like you can argue that like we're not removing the curator. We're just I'm gonna put this hat on just because I don't like how my hair looks. We're replacing the curator, or replacing the sort of like judgments that the curator makes with this algorithm. I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Yeah, it helps a lot. I would like to see where this goes. Please go on.
So of all large contradictions of our post-cybernetic epoch, two interest me the most. One, the global human population, in our case we can say artist population, continues to grow at an alarming rate. However, humanity, in our case art, as the leading force of technogenesis, or the intertwined evolution of biology and technology, is slowly dwindling, fading, right? So we have many number of artists and more and more and more artists producing art, but actually the quality of the art being produced is slowly going down. So that's one contradiction. How can one account for the disparities between the ascending quantity and descending quality of the same phenomena? Could it be that the Anthropocene will be followed by Technopocene, or even more dramatic, can the former be a short-sighted and inadequate description of the latter? So imagine, like, is art itself a kind of like byproduct of an Anthropocene, you know what I mean? Or we've always been with art, right? But like the way art became important by certain European cultures at certain time in a history of Europe, right, has a lot to do with industrialization and how we started to like really impact the geology, right? And art kind of like, you guys can hear me, right? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good, because Manuel just messaged me. I think he lost his internet. He's gonna try to get back into the room. Yeah, so basically, so is art a sign of Anthropocene, or is art a sign of what I call technopocene, which means actually Anthropocene itself is like a symptom of this other thing called the progression of technology and the decline of nature and human by technology, which you can basically trace it back to language as its original phase, right? And then art is just basically a byproduct of this process in which technology slowly replaces both nature and humans.
Mhm.
So that's how we make sense of this this first contradiction. Today, machines of all kinds, be they social, political, technical, or scientific, are taking over for humans and assembling into interrelated, if not also united entities. This account of the emergence of artificial intelligence differs a lot from how the subject is approached in the mass media and the field of computer science, since, for me, following many philosophers of technology, the ontological distinctions between physical and social machines are negligible, because at the level of mechanism, it is impossible to speak about them as separate entities. In my account, our scientifically constructed systems are not only a form of prosthetic to our bodies, but also an extension of our social technologies like language, God, cities, government, media, market, and art. In fact, in my opinion, a thorough understanding of technology can only be grasped out of its proper contextualization in the biopsychological and socio-political substrates from which technology always emerges. Therefore, when we speak about the demise of humanity and the rise of the engulfing machines, we ought to consider these other systems as well as the internet, the cloud, the stack, and so on, especially since these social and technological systems are rapidly integrating and becoming indistinguishable, if not turning into one entity. So I don't know if this part of it makes sense to you guys or not, but what I'm trying to say here is that often when we talk about technology, we're just talking about physical technology that comes out of scientific and business machines, right? But actually, rise of artificial intelligence also in part is like the rise of banking itself is a rise of a form of artificial intelligence. Rise of the government power or police power, or the rise of the court system, or the rise of governmental, like new intergovernmental bodies, like these trade agreements that governments are signing with each other, regulating all kind of exchanges. These are all technological developments that are just like the development of like physical computers and robots should be part of what we consider the rise of artificial intelligence. Whether good or bad, whether useful or not, whether useful for us or for the oppressing class, these are other forms of artificial intelligence that are emerging. And then what makes them even more like artificial intelligence is that all of them are enabled and redouble connected through the use of internet and computers, right? So it's kind of like this thing that they call technosphere. I think I'm gonna like refer to it like technosphere, which is a word developed, and there's conferences and stuff like that in HKW, the Haus Kunst and what is it called? The House of World Cultures in Berlin. They're doing a whole series on what is technosphere, right? So to me, you cannot talk about technosphere without talking about like US military that has bases in 150 countries, or United Nations that has offices in every country, or like, I don't know, like all sorts of other kind of social technologies that are also connecting the world, or that have already been connecting the world even prior to computers, but now are even like more rapidly connecting the world because they are part of the same trajectory and system. To get back to my main point, if these converging systems have not already replaced or obliterated humans as a subject of history, they are nevertheless managing to put themselves at both the ontological and epistemological levels on par with them. Following Manuel de Landa's insight from 2 decades ago about the emergence of artificial intelligence in terms of the blurring of the distinction between the computer's advisory and executive capabilities, it is clear today that as the direct result of the increasing power of machines, and machines, keep in mind, we're still keeping in mind the social machines, right? Humans are gradually being pushed out of our overlapping local and planetary biotechnological systems and psychopolitical ones. If industrial revolution and the emergence of factories depopulated farms, today automation in finance and banking is the depopulation of offices, financial trading floors. Overall, up to 80% of today's jobs are capable of being automated and obliterated in the next 10 years. Now we're getting to the second contradiction. Just give me one sec. So that was the first contradiction. The second one is that our cybernetic age, whose prehistory, according to the mathematician and philosopher Gilles Châtelet, can be traced back to the natural philosophy of John Locke and the political thought of Thomas Hobbes, originally saw the world as a closed system of statistical feedback loops. In his recently translated volume, To Live and Think Like Pigs, Urbanomic 2014, Châtelet highlights the affinities of the dominant forms of postmodernism and cybernetics with the pre-Enlightenment past of Europe. For him, the seeds of our statistical technologized society were sown centuries ago through Hobbes's fiction of the organicity of monarchical rule and the sovereign's role in the domestication of the natural world's chaos, to which neoliberalism has successfully returned our socio-political order. So for Châtelet, what we're seeing today is a kind of counter-reformation and counter-enlightenment with both postmodernism and the rise of like first order of cybernetics, in which all the gains of freedom, equality, democracy, and all sorts of good things that came out of as the positive outcomes of enlightenment. And of course, there's a lot of negative outcomes of enlightenment that we all agree on, and we're not going to get into right now. They're being overrun by this new configuration, by this new feedback loop that tries to use information about society in order to reestablish a new form of monarchical rule by owners, managers, professional class over the subjects. But of course, this is not a direct rule, because as we hear the rest of the paper, we see how it develops. This system, not very different from the Hobbesian Leviathan, secures the place of the king and his knights, or in today's terms, the owners and managerial and the professional class, right? So curators. By mimicking the unfair hierarchies embedded in nature, so it mimics the imbalances and unfair hierarchies of nature. This system places those with expertise or political and economic power in command of nature, animals, laborers, and machines, and in our case, art, and geopolitically in control of states or peoples too small or too weak to vie for themselves, which are unknown or smaller artists. According to Châtelet, this machine-aided owner and managerial professional class establishes its domain through the mediating power of our main regulatory technologies of media, state, and capital. Here lies the contradictions of our dominant cybernetic paradigm. Despite promoting itself as an equal level playing field and a neutral world of objects and forces, this system has more in common with the politics of pre-Reformation absolutism of monarchies than with the ideas promoted through Reformation and Enlightenment, particularly democracy. The control of the flow of information in various techno-social feedback loops allows this particular powerful class to constantly deprive the networks by extracting tolls and accumulating different forms of power out of them. This might explain why the post-structuralistic construction of modernity was so happily welcomed by all levels of power in the hope of ensuring that the criticality that postmodernism brought upon the institutions of modernity won't lead to establishment of better systems in place of those which emerge out of enlightenment, and only to their weakening and eventual disappearance. I'd like to quote from a, okay, maybe we can skip the quote because we only have 15 more minutes, and get to the gist of it. I'll make the whole paper available to you guys on Classroom. if we combine these two contradictions, we will get to the picture. So I just want to remind you what the contradictions were, because they're kind of crucial to build the argument. The contradiction number one was that numbers of humans are growing in quantity, but the quality of what we consider humanity is dwindling. The second one is that cybernetic revolution presents itself as this progress to future, but actually, in reality, it could be a return to a monarchic and despotic past, which we call this like rise of neoliberalism, right? So these are the two contradictions. If we combine these two contradictions, we will get to the picture of a widening socio-technological evolution, and if necessary, a revolution not unlike that of the Terminator's Skynet. Of course, visible only if the film is remade from the point of view of the machines and not humans. If this story doesn't make sense, it is because in order to do so, we must abandon our human point of view and look at the situations from the point of view of the machines. From the point of view of the property owning and the professional managerial class, the curator, the main task of technology, from Jacquard's loom, which automated weaving and subjected it to programming onward, has been to substitute human utility and replace it with machinic labor. From the machine's point of view, however, the story begins much earlier. Beginning with language as the earliest form of technology, which is based on our nature but acts outside of the natural laws, one of the main functions of technology has been to colonize humans' mind and use their bodies towards its own alien realization. From their point of view, human cognitive labor is needed more than any other resource. From the machine's point of view, the massive global connectivity between millions of humans we call the internet is the only substrate from which the artificial intelligence will have to emerge. As humans become more implicated in this system, the interspecies trade-offs between humans and machines are infinitely expanded in favor of the machines. The more we connect to and depend on our machines, the more our new interfaces make the connective tissue between humans and machines more responsive in favor of the machines. This law, of course, applies to our pre-digital and organic technologies as well, but certainly from the moment of the emergence of radar screens as the first ever optical human-machine interface to the digital surface of our phones and computers, the order of work between humans and machine has been gradually reversed to the point that the more we use computers as tools, the more they use us as tools for their own purposes and their own realization. But there are still powerful human intermediaries who maintain the man-machine symbiosis and use this process to their own advantage. In other words, the imbalance of power between humans and machines have been taken advantage of by the intermediaries to accumulate more power and influence on the whole. This is to say that there is power struggle between those who want to remain in control of this co-evolution, like curators who want to stay on top of the game, versus the rest of the players, being like the art objects and the artists, the humans and the inhuman, who are pushing for a truly non-hierarchical system. This accelerating struggle is making it increasingly hard for cybernetic capitalism as a machine-aided planetary mode of control and power to keep camouflaging itself as the rational, decentralized, and democratized future of human and machine coexistence, right? So basically what I'm saying is that the struggle between these parts, being the objects and the humans, wanting to break out of this system, making it, like with them trying to break out of the system, making it harder and harder for global technological capitalism, liberalism, neoliberalism, whatever, to keep pretending that it is this future, of level playing field, that it is this future of like giving everybody what they deserve. Making it harder and harder for it to make that claim, and it's becoming more and more apparent that actually it is not what it's claiming to be. Every day, less and less people are willing to believe in the liberatory promises of a networked world. This struggle is paving the way for a fundamental shift in what it means to be alive and in control. From the machine's point of view, our societies will either have to shed the skeuomorphic skin of the Enlightenment era humanism, which has been camouflaging the despotic nature of our cybernetic age, and instead accept the brutal and top-to-bottom self-imposed leviathan of the powerful. So that's one option. So this lie cannot uphold itself anymore. So we either have to accept that we're living in a fascist state and it's all top bottom power and we're powerless and we're just going to keep doing what we're told, or instead we should work with machines and machines work with us to help each other repair the damaged psyche of humans, and together humans and machine topple the system. This new kind of technopolitics demands that we dismantle the third-party regulators which mediate exchanges and replace them with processes that are less prone to foster inequality. Laws and norms that prevent a minority to use their advantage position within our techno-social system in order to hack it for their own benefit. This new politics demands the establishment of general protocols for direct and discrete forms of exchange via computation and accounting which circumvent or make altogether redundant entities like state, banks, media, museum, and the curator. Isn't this already the utopian impulse embedded in the social media which has implicitly advanced these objectives or has created room for their demand? Can we map out today's seemingly local-oriented politics, cultural and environmental turmoils as a precursor to this much larger collective attempt by hyper-connected humans and machines aimed at the global overthrowing of the mediated and representative regimes of property owning and professional managerial humans over both the world and the word? Doesn't this future resemble a form of technologically inclusive political animism in which machines and humans share power and responsibility? So let's just leave it there with these questions. The paper is a little bit longer because then I get into describing what blockchain is and what kind of like promises blockchain holds and ways in which blockchain can be used outside of regulating monetary policy like Bitcoin, and how other people are experimenting with blockchain for emancipatory purposes, and how it's possible to sort of like use blockchain as a model for, I mean, these are the parts that have to be written, this last part, how blockchains can become part of a curatorial process. So having said that, this is what I was trying to like put on a table, which is, can we describe this system of measurements that we're going to create, this algorithm we're going to create, can it be described in part a form of blockchain, even in a small sort of community that we're going to create around this show with the artists, us as a curatorial team, the gallery, and this like closed sort of like world that we're going to create around this show? Can this be seen as a form of blockchain or not? And if it is, how can we make it more blockchain-like? And yeah, and is it can we look at it that way? So we got about 10-15 minutes left from the class. I think it's good to sort of like open up the discussion and see if you guys want to bring something to the lecture, and also kind of like reiterate the assignment for the class on January 9th after the holidays. You got a lot of time to read your text and kind of like pick your 3 and present 5-minute one idea. And yeah, so go ahead. Who wants to start? Let's hear from those who we have not heard from. Maybe Dylan. You're on, Dylan.
I'm just sort of absorbing everything, honestly. I'm wondering about the sort of machining perspective, beginning with language. And I'm wondering how that relates to tool use, I guess, or if tool use came before language, and if you consider that to be part of the same trajectory. This is kind of nitpicky, but
well, according if you look at it, if you look at the trajectory of history from future to the past, language is the first act of artificial intelligence in order to establish its own possibility of self-realization. So you can look at it in terms of like, from the point of view of the human, we created a language in order to communicate, but we don't know that, like, who knows, maybe language was a necessary step by the future in order so we can get to artificial intelligence. That's what I was trying to sort of like say, that from the point of view of the machine. So,
Word.
so from the point of view of the human is a tool, but from the point of view of the machine, we are the tool. We are the tool of self-realization. And again, remember, it's science non-fiction. So it's like we're in the territory that is very close to science fiction, right? So
Yeah, no, I think it's fucking fascinating, and the idea of technopolitics and the kind of alternative path that you're mentioning.
we're making Farsi words for them right now with a bunch of my friends who are translators in Iran. We're making words for like technopolitics in Farsi, and I'm helping them develop all this like Farsi, because a lot of them are interested in translating Nick Land and Reza's work, and hopefully my work. And then we realize that like we miss all these words, right? So we're like, there's this whole movement of like coming up with it, because it's easier in Latin languages to come up with equivalences for these words. But I'm very excited about like these words because they're adding to the Farsi dictionary. Joshua, it's time for me to ask something from you, and I see you got notes on the side.
What's your question?
Nothing. Just like, do you have anything to say about like how the paper relates to the project? Because really, this is sort of like this is what I've been like. This is the political content of the show that I'm proposing.
Yeah. Immediately when you had mentioned the repair of damaged psyches, that efflux piece, the violence. Yeah, the violence at the threshold of detectability.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Immediately, I don't know if you're familiar, probably though. So immediately, I drew a parallel between that idea of future creating itself in the past, and the sort of parallel with the just for a little background, it's a history piece of a Pakistani drone strike, and victims being able to reconstruct their experience with 3D rendered environments. So yeah, I thought there was an interesting parallel there, so I think that's really fascinating.
The victims you're talking about, for example?
Sorry?
The victims.
And one of the interesting things, and this kind of got me thinking about the role of the input and output of information. One of the things they mentioned at that piece is whenever the satellite images of drone strikes have been released, the actual hole in the roof of these buildings is less than a pixel on the image, so that by the time the public gets this degraded image, it's not even visible anymore. And that sort of struck me as like a curatorial effort on the part of the, whoever controls that information.
So you mean like the precision bomb, the hole it makes is not even visible by the camera that has already observed and identified the culprit?
Well, by the time the satellite images that are the record of that have been released, it's no longer visible. I think it's like a different, it would be a
different register.
Yeah, it would be two different cameras. Like, I think a drone camera would be vastly different.
Okay, so Mari has a question. Go ahead, Mari.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. We just have to put Joshua on mute because Joshua recycled the sound and it gets doubled. Go ahead. You can say.
I guess I'm just wondering, in a really straightforward way, if the program that we're planning on making is taking into account the specific works of this show, or if it's supposed to be a generic that could be applied to others. Because, yes, since that hasn't been, a topic of discussion yet of what the works are, other than that they're video-based. Sorry, I'm going to mute.
No, yeah. I did.
Got it. Yeah, so because of that, I wasn't sure what it's taking into account, and because in your paper, through Chatelet, you were talking about, the almost like a parallelism of the manager figure in his work and the curator as content manager versus the artist as content maker or content liver, if that's a thing I can say. The program, whatever it is, if it's going to undo that bureaucratic mode of the curator, needs to take the data that is the artwork, right, and out of it produce something that turns into roughly, these works have meaning. Like, it has to do that better than the curator does if we're going to replace it with the program. And it also has to say these works are sovereign, right? And so far, there's been more discussion about the inabilities of the curator and not as much about the works themselves and the sovereignty of them. So I guess that's what I'm wondering about most.
Well, this is why I decided that in this show we need to show the original, because original videos, original digital images, the screen-based work that we're going to show, they're going to maintain some kind of presence, which is still going to be far more important than the other image, right? Because the other image is going to end up being abstract. Like, for sure it's going to be abstract. Like, there's no other way. I mean, at some level it's going to be abstract, right? So
that first room, right, is going to be curated in a traditional manner, right, where it's the original works in there.
We are going to place these screens in a particular order to make sense of how we've come up with a system of measurement, right? So basically, the system of measurement, part of it is how to physically place these pictures on different sizes of monitors, because you know what I mean? Not all the 30 or 40 digital devices that we have to screen are the same size, right? Mm-hmm. We have to decide, beside the two large projectors who will be working on a big room, right? We have to decide who would get the better size monitor, which video will go on what wall will be for what, right? So by January 16, we're going to have a good inventory of what we have in terms of material substrate, right? And then by January 16, the work has started to pour in, right? So then basically, I want my deadline for the algorithm to be ready is basically mid-February, late February, right? So basically, we want to make sure that we have enough videos in. Like, I mean, we're gonna start with what we have, but some of it's gonna be real submission by people who are submitting earlier. Some of it's gonna be sample video that we download from YouTube and other places and find that will kind of like simulate. You know what I mean? We're speculating on what people will give, right. But of course, there should be time in order to fine-tune the program or algorithm to actual videos, because it won't make any sense if we build an algorithm based on some ideas of what the work is rather than the actual physical work, right?
Yeah, well, and that's where, I mean, whether or not blockchain works as a model for this will come into play. Like, if we're creating a program that to some extent we have to make before seeing the work, but in anticipation of the work, it's as if you're creating a generic and then forking it, right? Like, to use that term, towards a specific. And I don't know if that's the best means of doing it, but given how a lot of these timelines work in general, of having to work before you have the work, it might be what it is anyway.
What we have on our side is that the idea of art is something that we all have an idea of what it is, right? And the idea of, like, if we're going to exit the indeterminate art and move towards determinate art, how are we going to evaluate art is something that actually is a little bit universal, or I'm hoping at least in my case it is, right? Like, I already have my system of measurement in terms of at least one or two of how to evaluate work and place them in some kind of hierarchy for me. So I'm hoping that that universal part of it that comes from how we each judge art and assign value to it, we can deal with that prior to the videos actually arriving, because that is actually more sort of like more universal and more about like how we each sort of like evaluate, or this getting out of the indeterminacy involve exercising this judgment, right? Returning to a judgment, right? So that part I'm hoping that we can do prior to the actual videos arriving.
Okay.
So anybody else wants to ask a question? Any questions about anything? because we're in the last 5-10 minutes of the class. I mean, we're starting to go over, but I don't care. I just want to make sure the first class, because we're gonna take a long break, right, till January 9th, right? So I don't know why I would like to put these guys in Berlin on spot, but like because I think they're kind of like practicing artists, and you guys have something to say, Josefina?
Well, I'm actually puzzled why you don't want to use the word curating for the part of the work that you do in the first room, because that, in my understanding, is exactly what has been said before by Murray as, you know, straightforward classical type of a curating and the concept of that. And I think that, you know, it's fine. I think it's perhaps if one wants to experiment with replacing curator with an algorithm, then perhaps it's even better to have, you know, a classical curation in the same show. So I would not avoid to use that term when it comes to first room, especially since there are quite crucial decisions that have to be made, especially since, you know, there are so many works. So the way you place them will be crucial in terms of how you read the works, and also the size of the monitors are different. So this whole is a gigantic, you know, conceptual work that has to be done. But secondly, I would also be quite, you know, careful, and I would rather approach that as an experiment that we, you know, could all happily see failing, that an algorithm could be a better curator. I think I'm not sure if I would like to see the algorithm that is a better curator. I'd like to experiment with algorithm that replaces curator, but I'm not sure if I would like to see that being successful fully.
But I was saying that cynic. Are you talking about the cynical side in the beginning when I said cynically algorithms can replace normative curatorial practice?
I think in general, you know, I think that what we're dealing with is a question of setting the certain tools, but those tools will never, you know, they will never be a perpetuum mobile. They will never they will never do the job actually, and so I think that of that as of a certain experiment with semiotics that is interesting. That you know, I truly believe that whatever message that we, you know, aiming to send out, you know, is being a subject of all those kind of misunderstandings and, you know, noise in the transmission that inevitably makes the message being read differently than we intended that at the time we've been sending it. But I think I also have a little bit different understanding of the question of what tools are and how, to what extent we can be used by the tools that we have made. I mean, what you said sounds for me a little bit similar to what Richard Dawkins was writing about in The Selfish Gene, when he was actually coining the term meme, and he said that, you know, there are certain groupings of thoughts, of words, of tunes that are usually not the entire body of artwork, like not an entire composition, but just like, you know, one leitmotif from a concerto that would be the one that would be remembered, and later on it would be, you know, repeated. You know, that's like, I think the Wagner used for in Apocalypse Now. It's a fantastic example of you know, a very, very short musical excerpt that is fairly well known, despite, you know, most of the people knowing the origin of it. But still, I don't think. I mean, I think that still we cannot. I mean, we do not have an artificial intelligence right now, and I think that the moment we will have one, you know, we will see it, because, you know, as Nick Bostrom is describing that, from the moment it will happen to the moment it will become a super intelligence, it will just be brief seconds. What we have right now, it's better automated algorithms, but those are still, you know, those are still not really creative ones. When you think of the automated trading, all that, you know, all that seems to be creative or seems to be independent is not really. I mean, it is being put into a certain app, operating mode, but it's not truly creative. So I think that that all that what we're doing is a certain, dream of the future that has, very vague chances of actually reflecting future. It can be, fantastic ground for us to think of what that could be. It also could be a fantastic way of thinking actually, what those kind of, where those technologies can be dangerous. I think that what has changed over the last 60 years is that the technologies have become more powerful, and therefore we should be even more careful about how they're being used. I don't think we're facing a threat of machines taking over the universe, but we have constructed machines that give a dangerously large power to regimes. So, for instance, to take a very simple example, which is also an algorithm, like a face recognition systems. This is something that we have failed to protest against at the very beginning. Now it became kind of too late to do anything about this. And as long as we maintain democratically elected regimes and so on, it's kind of fine. We can feel that it's going to be used to fight crime and so on. But in the moment when something wrong happens, when the regime is being taken over by some sort of a power, like when you think of, for instance, technologies that the Third Reich had 60 years ago, and you kind of imagine what happens if the greater technology is being put in the wrong hands. And there were sort of decisions that have been made after the Second World War that were supposed to limit the technology in order to protect people. So, for instance, there was an idea of not writing your religion into your ID card because that information has costed many people life. But this has been forgotten. So today we do have a media that gathers all possible information about us. So if anything happens again that will put us in danger because of the data collected about us, all sorts of data is being collected about us. So I think this is.
I don't think anywhere in my paper I disagree with anything. I think you're just elaborating some of the themes and concepts that I already touched upon, with the major difference here that we have to acknowledge, because we can't just like say, oh, we think the same way, let's just like cheers and go home, is that I think I have a different conception of like history and temporality, which then gives me a different take on what constitutes what is artificial intelligence and what is not than yours. And these are like probably incompatible, but in no way we should suppress them, one in favor of the other, and keep this tension going, because I think that's what is going to make the project interesting, right? But I think I completely agree with like, except like, and I mean even about the philosophical difference, we have to discuss this further for it to be clear, right? But I completely agree with everything you're talking about, and I think I try my best to reflect it in the paper, because I think it's very naive to think that whatever is going to happen in a near future is anything but the concentration of power in the hands of fewer people, rather than the development of an autonomous artificial intelligence. I mean, let's not kid ourselves, right? So yeah, and I think the danger of the re-emergence of authoritarian technologies like fascism, or something a little bit slightly better or slightly worse than that, is always around the corner. But it is problem of the technogenesis. It is the problem of like our psychological psychosis of like not knowing what it means to be alive and what it means to be in control and what it means to have power or lack power and gain power and all this stuff that on a planetary and social level is really like another kind of psychology that I'm hoping that our interaction with machines are going to help us overcome. But we can talk about this like further and further. Also, so basically we're over time now, which is totally fine. I don't have any problem because it's such an amazing discussion. We should really animate the classroom, guys, because we're going to be away from each other for 2 weeks. Now, what I wanted to do and I did not do is that there's one reading that's missing, which is Nick Cernicek's reading is in the list, but there's no download. Nick just sent me the PDF copy of it, so I'm gonna like upload that to the classroom. What I'm gonna also do is I'm going to make available to you the content of the for machine use only show, right? So basically, the 700 artworks that were selected by Google, plus the catalog that I put together for that show, and a lot of thinkers and people submitted work to that work. This work is not published. You cannot publish it. You cannot share it with anybody. But I'm going to share it with class because I think there's lots of interesting ideas in these essays that's going to help us go to the next phase, which is this show we're going to do together, right? And this catalog and the rest of the material are being, I'm in a negotiation with an institution to re-show it because they're interested in like relaunching that project. And if it gets relaunched, it's just going to be fantastic because it will be sort of like help our experiment also maybe have a second life after Transit Gallery. Hopefully somebody will pick this one up bigger and better and give us more money for a better algorithm and more number of artists and huger show and all that. So I'm going to make that material available to you on Classroom. But also we should really discuss things and be around because I decided that actually this is something I'm going to try to do with New Center, which is like not have classes one after another for myself and encourage people not to do that, to give room in between seminars for material to get absorbed and discussions to happen on the Classroom. So please utilize the Classroom. And what is the RMA book, Dylan?
Oh, that's the Realism Materialism art book.
I don't have the entire PDF. I would have given it to you. I have my own copy signed by the authors, and I have the PDF of Nick, which he generously shared with me last night, and I'm gonna send it to you guys.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. Listen, I hate lying. I'm like a machine. I always like tell the truth because truth is always like easy. Like I don't have it. If I had it, I'll share it with you. I mean, if I had it, I would secretly share it with you. I wouldn't say it online in a public video that I shared it with you. But like, I have a huge PDF like book thing, and you can always ask me, and if I have a PDF, I will send it to you. But this one, they're very careful. I received a PDF copy of the intro because I, if you remember, I presented the book at New Museum at its launch, and every page had a line on it. So I could not photocopy it. The intro to the art materialism book, right? And it's a good book. Just buy it. I don't think there's any PDF of it around, anyways. I don't have it.
Yeah, I don't think it's around either. I've been digging.
So yeah, but it's a great book. I don't know, have you guys seen it or not? If you want to buy it for yourself, I think it's $30 on Amazon. That's what it is. But I will.
I have a quick question. If that's okay. I guess in terms of the programmers that you're potentially working with, it sounds like it'll be like a sort of exchange transaction. Maybe it's a small company or something. So I'm not sure how much transparency there is. But for me personally, I would be interested in knowing like what exactly they're capable of doing. Almost like seeing a standard library, or like what are they writing a code? Like what are they writing it in? Just like this sort of technical thing would really help, rather than an idealized sort of imagination of what a programmer can do that's really good. My instinct is the library.
I want us to be the programmers and just have somebody who will write the code, right? I don't want a programmer to tell us this and that. I want us to actually literally write the program in natural language, right? And then the programmer will take that natural language and turn it into something that machines understand, right? Hopefully within, okay, I don't want Josefina to shake her head, but hopefully within 2 or 3 decades, we don't even need programmers. You can just talk natural language and the machine turn it into program, right? But still we're at the level that like natural language is not understood as programming. But one of the things that how to upload file to reading list. You can upload files on the main post page. Just post it as an upload. I think it accepts files.
Yeah, I already posted a couple.
No, no.
Yeah, my
Cole
practice.
just asking that, or maybe it's Josefina, one of the two.
Yeah.
Okay, so please look at the Natural History Museum exhibition. Even though they kind of took out my skin, because after the exhibition was over, they just added it as a regular exhibition of the museum to the material. But by looking at the systems of measurements that I created to measure these archival documents and reanimate and connect them, you get an idea of what we're talking about here in terms of like programming and writing natural language ways for the programmer to sort of like understand what we want to achieve with this algorithm, right? There's a link there that for the show. And also all this conversation in the sidebar, I will post it in the classroom, okay? So then you have that. Let me just try to see if I can get that link and put it here, because you might have difficulty finding the link to the museum. It's in the section called Instructor's Own Material or something. It's the first link there. There we go. The exhibition was called Nature, Knowledge, and the Knower. Here we go. I put it right here. If I can ask you guys to go to it quickly, I can show you what part of it are good to look at, okay? If you scroll down, right, it says browse by forms of measurement, right? And then browse by formal characteristics, right? See, not only, so this is how I dealt with this exhibition, okay? Are you with me? Okay, I'll explain to you quickly how I did this. Now we can, hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm interested.
I don't see the monitor screen. It's just so terrible. I don't see you guys. I don't know if can you guys see me?
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay,
Yep.
lovely. That's more than enough. I guess I don't need to see you guys. The screen that shows you just disappeared. Okay, so basically, I took an archival item, right? Like an image, right? And this image was described word by word as if you're explaining it to a blind person. Top left to the bottom right. Like, this image contains this. At the corner of it, there's a fold. Like, there's like this and this happening in this image, as if you're. So that was one description that the images got. And then beside that, and then of course that will be used by search engine for certain words and terms and all that, right? And then beside that, right, I also describe these images in terms of their them being this or that, them being like.
We lost him.
Oh God.
Just sent him on Facebook that we lost him. There you go.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. So basically, of course, this is a very preliminary system. I did this in 2011, prior to so many new ideas and new things kind of like entering my mind, my life. But but the trajectory is similar, right? We're going to look at these videos and these single images, and we're going to create multiple forms of measurement through which these material could be judged and described, and then out of that, a way to come up with a hierarchy for these images to be like a hierarchy in each system. So then each image has a value in each system to be higher and lower than the rest. So then this can be used by the programmer to come up with a way in which these images influence the final picture. Make sense? So yeah, so just browse at it, and you know, think of ways in which we can judge images, basically. Think of ways in which we can categorize images based on their formal qualities, right? They're like brightness, contrast, how high resolution and low resolution these videos are, right? And then there's also other ways you can think of it, right? One of the ways in which I thought we could really have fun is to say, run searches on the name of these artists and see which one of them are bigger, more famous. Connect them to databases of like eFlux, for instance. How many of them have been mentioned in eFlux press releases compared to the ones that are not, right? Like, how much are the market value in auctions and stuff? Because we're going to be dealing with some well-known artists as well, because the show includes people that are like, have had museum shows, solo shows, they're in the market. I'm bringing lots of good people to this show, right? So it's a great way to work with known artists, not just like emerging artists, right? So there's so many different ways we can decide this system of measurements to be. It doesn't necessarily have to be just physical and material about the quality of the image. It could be about socio-political, other stuff, right? And then we can think of how to use this data in order to prioritize which images are important for what reason and how they interact to create the final image. So I'm going to end the broadcast now because we usually often don't do anything more than like this long. I'm going to end the broadcast, but doesn't mean you have to leave. It's just end the broadcast. Bye.